Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess, and I'm very excited today to continue on what feels like the journey of the work that I'm supposed to be doing in life. Topic of today is heavily tied into chiropractic, I believe, and I think this is going to be a major part of protocols that I share with future patients in my practice, and I will gladly share it with you now. So without any further ado, we're going to get right into it. You might remember last week I mentioned, obviously the episode was mega late, and it was for a very good reason. I just wasn't feeling very inspired, feel like I needed some more information, and I knew there's a specific talk going on at the Parker University Homecoming. That's my chiropractic school, and Homecoming basically consists of like it's just a convention where people speak. They had the guy from Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary. They had Angela Duckworth, who wrote Grit. So some good kind of motivational stuff, but the very first talk I went to was like 8 a.m. a week ago, last Friday. And I'm blanking on the guy's name, but he's a chiropractor. And in his practice, he noticed things about specifically men at first with low testosterone and kind of these different patterns that were going on with them. And were also honestly going on with himself. And a lot of his experiences are, correlated to mine in some ways, and other ways my own experience kind of lumps in on top of this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what he was on about. Not the whole talk, because he did 2 hours. We're going to talk about one aspect of his talk and why I think it's so important and how it ties into this progression that I'm doing with these next 6 episodes and the last one, the most recent one. So quick review. Last week, kind of inspired by the root chakra and the adrenal glands. I talked a lot about grounding, so some of the potential science behind just walking in nature, having your skin make contact with the grass, jumping in the ocean, really anything where your body is kind of free touching nature, can cause basically an exchange of particles that is beneficial. It's calming. It helps you kind of recenter. So when we're inside all day without natural light and without natural, earth features, that can obviously be slightly agitating to our nervous system, potentially adding to our stress. I also spoke about more experimental, or some would say potentially cutting edge, something that might be more widely accepted in the next decade or so, but I talked about kratom. Kratom is a plant. It's a member of the coffee family, but why it's controversial is it acts on the opioid receptors in the brain, helps you kind of calm down. People experiencing addiction issues to specific substances, or even to like legal things like alcohol or food, it's been shown to help cut hunger associated with addiction, help like regulate your hunger hormones, just kind of press pause on everything so that your body can do that for you. That's been my experience. I had a lot of success using kratom to help de-stress. Tastes like dirt, but if you put it with electrolytes, something like a Gatorade or a Powerade, it's not too bad, and you're also getting electrolytes. We'll talk about electrolytes in later episodes, but kind of the studied supplement side of that was a multivitamin. I mentioned that I take the Thorne Basic 2 a day vitamin. That one was developed a long time ago by Thorne for bariatric patients, so people who aren't absorbing as much nutrients from their food anymore because they shrank their stomach with surgery. But it's also good for you too if you're just a normal person without bariatric surgery. So that's kind of the base. Again, the root chakra is like the base of, if you do nothing else, get outside, touch grass, have some tea. It doesn't have to be kratom, just tea. Everyone loves tea. Tea is one of the oldest things in the world. Substances that people drink, it's got a little bit of caffeine, but not so much as coffee. So you get a little boost, but you're also not putting yourself into overdrive. And then last but not least, just a multi. Just covering all those bases. There's no reason why not to. So that's the review of last week. So moving up the spine, basically the root is kind of the tip of the coccyx, which is the very, very base tip of the spine. Now moving up into the sacrum. So the sacral chakra, kind of located, the nerve plexus inside the sacrum, helps innervate your lower extremities, among other things. Very important in terms of like walking and like locomotion, biomechanics. But in this case, the glands we're looking at, in yoga, this is a very kind of sexual based chakra. It's kind of the center of sexual energy for women, especially because that's where the womb is. That's where, basically we're 3D printing babies to continue the human race. So very, very important. For guys, still important. I think more so than ever these days. There's a lot of kind of wild, uncontrolled sexual energy. So this is a good way that I've found to kind of help balance that. And so we'll get into, again, kind of the free thing that you can do. Something maybe a little more anecdotal or newer, maybe not studied as well, and then something heavily studied that can help. So 3 things, again, today. I'm going to start by going into sleep because it's relatively obvious. By the end, the 3rd thing, I'll get into the talk that the good doctor did last Friday. Especially now, it's been nice. I had a whole week to kind of digest that talk and really dive in deep, read myself in a little bit, even through all my schoolwork, just able to do a little extra research. So the free thing, it's going to sound super silly, but it's sleep. Right before the pandemic, I was working full-time as a CrossFit trainer. I was doing personal training. I was coaching classes. I was making ends meet, kind of. I was getting pretty frustrated. And that frustration ended up protecting me from basically being completely broke during the pandemic. So right around the end of 2019, I started interviewing different companies to get online work, remote work, and remote work was actually becoming popular even before COVID, but somehow I just had this spidey sense I needed to start looking and doing something else. So I was going to do that job and then still train people on the side and try to make a little extra money. So January 2020, I was hired by Whoop, WHOOP. They, a company, actually a classmate of mine at Harvard, started Whoop in the innovation lab, which was by the football stadium. So while I was practicing early mornings, breaking my head against other people, they were over in the innovation lab creating this strap that goes on your arm. There's a sensor. It reads your blood flow, measures it against polysomnography standards, and tells you kind of how your sleep is. It tells you, what your heart rate was during activities. And the daytime reading is really not all that accurate a lot of times, especially when you're moving your arms. Anytime you're at rest, it's pretty good. So I wear it now. I just wear an Oura ring when I sleep, but I take it off when I wake up. But it was a great job. I learned a lot in terms of physiology, and it really kind of awoken my love of science, or kind of reawakened it. And I think it was kind of one of the first steps in me getting to chiropractic school, even as early as 2019. So the big thing that changed my perspective there was the way they structured the days. So we structured days, midnight to midnight usually, just in terms of a calendar. But the way Whoop looks at it is when you go to sleep, that's the start of your day. And that's helpful for people who do shift work, who maybe don't sleep for entire days and then sleep for a long time. It's not like a calendar day. I go to bed at 10, I wake up at 6, kind of regular thing. That was one of the challenges there, was measuring people who had, atypical sleep schedules. And ultimately, it was that phrasing of just like your day begins when you go to sleep. I was like, wait, I'm doing my morning routine basically the night before. And I was someone who for the longest time had horrible sleep hygiene, loved to go out drinking, loved to stay up really, really late to the wee hours of morning, kind of a night owl, a little bit wild. And you can kind of see what I'm getting at. My high school football coach, he called this ambiguous person out there Good Time Charlie. And he would say, if you want to play football, you got to get your rest, you got to do all the right things, you got to get your schoolwork done. And Good Time Charlie's going to want to go out and party and drink and do things that are going to get you in trouble. And he's like, there's, time to have a good time, but you got to take care of business. And I definitely fell into a lot of the Good Time Charlie stuff, and there's all kinds of reasons for that that I understand now. And when you're young, you're just kind of wild. They say like sowing your wild oats, whatever that means. You kind of have to get into trouble a little bit to understand like, hey, that's not the way. And those who can avoid the trouble and just stay out of trouble off the bat, like, good on you. But it is funny that the kind of area that I'm focusing on, kind of being the more, sacral, being the more sexual chakra, recommending sleep for that, it's like, just go to bed. It's as simple as that. Staying up late, nothing good happens after midnight, and you might feel like it's good, drinking a bunch, meeting a nice young lady, and having a nice evening, ending at 4 or 5 a.m., whatever it may be. It's fun. I'm not going to say it's not fun. It is fun, but the effects on that you don't realize when you're young, because you kind of recover. The side effects are lesser. Like, the long-term effects are still there, but the immediate side effects are lesser. You can kind of make it through with adrenaline. You don't realize exactly what you're doing to yourself. But mentioning that it is this area really governs, the ovaries and the testicles, and that's where your sex hormones are made. And these sex hormones are so important for women and for men, and for different reasons. Women's hormone cycle goes over the whole month. There's all kinds of problems it can have, like PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, just irregular menstrual period, different things like that women go through. There's a lot of problems that can arise when you're not sleeping right. And sleep, it seems so simple, like it couldn't just be as simple as that, but it really is just simple as that. And men, on the other side, like guys that have low testosterone, I'm going to get into this a little bit more as we go, but long story short, your sex hormones, whether women or men, compete with cortisol. for a substrate. There's a complex or a substance called DHEA sulfate, and that's in your body, and then that can be basically your body, based on signals from your brain, is going to turn that into your different sex hormones or cortisol. And so if you're stressed out, it's going to start robbing your sex hormones of what they need to make this cortisol to make sure that you survive. So again, kind of going back to that survival mode theme. And without your sex hormones, you're going to be in trouble. You know, for a man, you're going to be less motivated. You're going to maybe be depressed. For women, again, you're going to have cycle issues. And it just affects our ability to do everything, to just function in life, to attract a mate, to act appropriately, to execute on your goals. It can really be detrimental to life. So that's kind of what today is about, lightly. And when I say sleep, I think I was having probably some of the most trouble sleeping ever at one point. So a couple of years after I mentioned that at Whoop, I'd moved to Austin, and I was definitely overweight from the pandemic. My mental health, everything had really slipped. I was not in a good spot. But I ended a relationship that needed to end. I moved to Texas, and just trying to recover and get better. I was really willing to try everything. So I had the supplements going. I was trying to sleep, but I was, struggling. And I remembered in the past I had done a sensory deprivation tank, floating in salt water. And I remembered it just makes you feel like you slept a whole night's worth of sleep in like an hour. So really effective way to kind of hack, if you will, like hack sleeping. Get a lot of good rest pretty quickly. So I found a float place that was like half a mile from my condo, and they had an unlimited membership going. And I don't think they expected anyone to actually do it. But for 2 straight months, I floated almost every day. And this was a little N of 1 experiment that I did as I was looking to basically cut weight to a lower weight class. And so I went from about 320 pounds to 240 pounds. Just 80 pounds lost. I was tracking my food. I'm not going to say my diet wasn't good, but I really believe that my body finally relaxing and getting some actual rest and sleep, maybe healing my hormones a little bit. There's a whole cascade of like positive health changes from the floating, but also everything else I was doing and training hard, good friends, good social life, good new job. I was really just thriving, finally getting some sleep. And anytime I feel like I am overstressed, I'm in trouble, I still, to this day, I haven't really found a good place in Dallas, but I will book a float and I'll go float. Just one of those things you can do to recover. So the side effect of floating also is, so you're floating in magnesium sulfate. So what's great about that is your skin will absorb some magnesium, and magnesium is something we're going to talk about 2 episodes from now, kind of on the heart episode. But magnesium is an incredible electrolyte that really helps with your heart, especially the muscles in the heart. For a nice regular heart rhythm, just helps you relax, helps you just calm down. So it's kind of twofold. And what's crazy about it too is when you get in the tank, if you really go all in, you're kind of in this really warm water, this salty water, and you're on top of it. You're basically floating. So you're essentially get put right back in the womb, which is kind of funny because this week is sacral chakra again. It's kind of where the women have the sacral chakras in their womb. And when you're floating, you're back in the womb. It's warm in there. You can't see anything. It's dark. You can't hear anything. You got earplugs in and you're underwater. And I've listened to music before, while doing it. I've done it without music. I've done like 3 hours straight with no sensory input. You start to hallucinate. Basically, your brain fills in the empty space. But yeah, you can't really smell anything in there either, except for kind of salt water. It smells like a pool. And so generally just your eyes alone, I think it's like 70 to 80% of your sensory input comes from your eyes. So even just wearing an eye mask, closing your eyes is going to get rid of a lot of input. But what I find is the touch. So gravity really is also kind of putting pressure on your body all the time. And your body's low-key like fighting against this gravity all the time. And you lay down, you're still fighting against it. But you get in the float tank, and I'll tell you what, it feels great. And when you get out, you almost have like Bambi legs. You know, you can't stand up hardly. It takes a couple minutes for you to like reacclimate to gravity. But really, I think for sure the visual part and just taking the pressure off your joints and everything, blood's flowing like crazy. You get in there, you get all kinds of weird just things your nervous system starts doing. Without the input, your body really gets to work in terms of like repairing, resting and repairing, and it really activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's one of the only ways I've found to really turn that thing on full blast, 0 to 100 with the rest. So can't recommend floating enough. It can be really expensive, depending on the spa that you go to. It could be really not readily available. Like I'm in the Dallas area and I've found like 2 or 3 places that are just a little bit too far for me. So at least for me to go regularly, I can go like once a month. So floating can't recommend it enough. But now we get to the third part, the last part. I mentioned last week a little bit about the vagus nerve. Vagus basically means wanderer because this nerve wanders throughout the body. And I promise this is the last nerdy thing we're going to talk about. But the vagus nerve partially innervates the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus in the brain is something I believe I damaged with traumatic brain injuries. It's the center of food intake, energy metabolism regulation, among other things. There's a lot that this thing does. But it signals the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland, if you know anything about it, it really controls like thyroid. It controls growth hormone and insulin through the liver, cortisol through the adrenal glands. So kind of works in tandem with what we talked about last week. And then we have the ovaries and the testicles making the female and male sex hormones. All through the hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which signals those other glands. So in a way, it's kind of like they call it the master gland. It's really the one that gets the party going. And that's why I think so many people struggle with this, because there's so many different systems that can be thrown off. I mean, it's like we're talking hydration, we're talking about growth and hypertrophy in your muscles and your fat cells. We're talking metabolisms like thyroid, and then we're talking the sex hormones. So being depressed, or a woman's cycle being off and making her feel crazy. It's widespread. You see people struggling with hormone issues all the time. So what this is called is the hypothalamic pituitary axis, and it spans from your brain down to your sacrum, basically your pelvis, your ovaries and your testes, reaches all the way down. And the vagus nerve kind of goes hand in hand. It's also the vagus nerve is in the brain and then also reaches down to the gut. So this axis, if you turn it upside down, a person's going to feel crazy. There's going to be high cortisol, highly stressed out. You're going to basically struggle to have any kind of metabolism or positive muscle gain. You might be a little, it kind of, you have the sexual side effects, low sex drive or high sex drive, kind of outside the normal range. And then the depression and the different other symptoms, like the cysts. So I can name this whole cascade of things. But really, if you're sleeping, if you really want to hammer it down, if you're doing a float, these things kind of have a chance. There's also a lot of other things that need to go well. You need to have a good diet and different things. You need all the substrate for all the hormones. But sleep is it's kind of the base of the pyramid. If you don't have that, it's all going to be thrown off. So we've already talked about sleep. We've talked about floating as a way to improve sleep. Floating is not something you have to do all the time. It could just be kind of punch glass in case of emergency. But the last piece of it is going to be kind of a well-studied supplement, or something you can get from your diet. In this case, we're talking probiotics. So beneficial bacteria in your stomach. We have a lot of different species that live in our stomach, and they're beneficial. They don't hurt us. They're not infections per se. It's more symbiotic, and they make a lot of great substances through their process of life. It helps us break down different fats, and helps break down carbs, all kinds of different things. I won't get too much into the actual details because there is another hour to talk about with that. But long story short, if these bacteria are not present or certain species are overactive, the vagus nerve picks up on this, and it writes back to the hypothalamus saying, hey, we're stressed. If you have like irritable bowel syndrome, something's not right with your gut, you're having like diarrhea, different symptoms, it's likely that your gut is not happy. And the amount of like nerve cells in that lower part of your body, we have our brain, and we kind of have our heart center, and we have the nerves in our gut, and they're powerful too. So if all three of those, kind of your head, your heart, and your gut, are not all able to relax, then there's going to be some level of elevated cortisol, stress, all that stuff. Adrenaline might be going. So for me, shortly after the floating, I think randomly, just through diet, my diet was pretty good at that time, and I obviously got down to about 240 pounds, but drinking like alcohol can ruin your sleep and your microbiome. And I was doing a decent amount of partying. Like, I felt really good because I had, kind of hit my goal and lost all this weight. I'd started a new job, and this was kind of a lifesaver. So this is around the time I started working for Thorne, and I got on the multivitamin, I got on the probiotic, and I felt a significant difference. The only thing I changed was the multivitamin and the probiotic. And I even did it as a kind of a test. I stopped taking the multi and still did the probiotic, and I just found that with the probiotic, I was basically just not irritable. And I think it's my microbiome was finally writing back to my brain that like, hey, things down here are okay. And like, if you're okay and heart's okay, let's be chill and find joy in life. So very, very grateful for that. I actually don't take the probiotic anymore, but I do eat a lot of kimchi, fermented foods, kefir. I'll drink kefir kind of first thing in the morning. First thing I do is just put back kind of a mouthful. You could do a glass if you wanted to, like a small glass. Obviously, Kefir, I get the 1% milk version, so there's not too much fat. There's a good amount of protein in it too, a little bit of carbs. It's got a little bit of everything in it. So it's a really easy way to also even get some calcium and go with that. So yeah, a lot of kefir, and I found that that's a good substitute for the probiotics. Definitely less expensive than that. So this again is like you're spending money, but like hardly. And the multivitamin, same deal. Like, these are easy solutions. You don't have to spend a whole bunch of money. If you don't want to float, you don't have to. Just cover your eyes and drink kefir, and you'll probably be okay. And just make sure you have 8-9 hours to sleep a couple times a week. And then when maybe you only have 8 hours of sleep, it is possible to quote unquote sleep fast. From what I've seen, I still get the right amount of sleep on a little bit less total time, as long as I kind of go into it with a good attitude. You got to kind of lose the FOMO. People are out partying, like, cool, let them. See you in the morning. I've definitely changed my attitude on that as I've gotten older, and wish I did it sooner, because all this stuff is really, really powerful. So yeah, that hypothalamic pituitary axis is what I was talking about. That's the basically part of the lecture that I saw last Friday. So that doctor, I'm gonna have to give him a shout out next week. I'm gonna go review who he was and maybe even reach out. He said email him with questions, so I'll talk to him, give him a shout out on next week's episode. But that's it. So as a reminder, last week, grounding, kratom or tea, and multivitamin. This week, sleep, saltwater float, and probiotics. Those 6 things can really go a long way. I have 5 more weeks of recommendations, and I have to say, all this stuff is super, super, super important. If you are feeling out of balance, stressed out, life's just a little bit too much, you got to start with the chemistry part. You get your chemistry right, you're probably going to feel a little bit better. You're going to be more apt to handle the challenges that are coming at you. So with that, I'm going to sign off for this week. But again, I am really excited. I feel like this is kind of my life's work kind of thing. So these first 2 episodes are really just kind of my first 2 steps toward that. So thank you for listening. Until next time, I'll see you.